In a recent barrage of tweets, Queenzflip said the following: "Let me ask a question. I'm going through something personal. Do you guys expect JBP to lay me off? Do you guys expect me to just take my anger out on my co-host? Please be honest. This has nothing to do with Mel or anyone else. People said my energy feels off, and it is, but that's because I'm dealing with something personal. I'm handling it and moving forward, so don't read too deep into it. There are moments in a man's life when the weight pressing upon him cannot be hidden. He walks into a room and the air shifts. The others might not know the details, but they feel it, the heaviness, the pull, the silent storm beneath his chest. It is in the slowness of his smile, the stiffness of his gestures, the way he answers a question not with lightness, but with a shadow. And because human beings are attuned to one another in ways they cannot always articulate, the shift is felt even before it is spoken. This is where Queenzflip found himself, a man tasked with bringing energy to a show where camaraderie and chemistry are everything, yet weighed down by personal trials that cannot be set aside like a coat left at the door. His admission was not of violence but of temptation, not of act but of possibility. The temptation, when pressed, to let the private storm bleed into the public arena, to crash out against those closest at hand. To sit at a table as a co-host is to be more than a man with opinions. It is to be a conduit of energy, to be attuned to rhythm, timing, banter, the invisible music of human conversation. When that energy is off, the entire composition falters. The show is not merely words, it is harmony. And when one instrument falls out of tune, the audience does not need to be told, they hear it. But what the audience often fails to understand is that behind that dissonance lies a human being, battered by forces unseen. They are quick to demand performance, slow to consider pain. In that space, the co-host is faced with a paradox: how to honor his own humanity while fulfilling his duty to the collective. Anger is a force older than civilization. It surges in the chest, tightens the throat, floods the mind with heat. In men, particularly those raised in environments where aggression is currency, anger offers itself as the most immediate release. To lash out, to crash out, is to momentarily silence the storm inside. But every man who has walked that path knows the price: relationships shattered, opportunities lost, trust dissolved like sugar in water. Queenzflip's question, whether his turmoil could or should be unleashed upon a fellow co-host, is the question of every man who has ever struggled to contain himself in the face of pressure. It is the question of whether the self should be surrendered to impulse or held fast by discipline. A show is not merely a platform, it is a brotherhood, or at least it must aspire to be if it is to endure. Each co-host is bound to the others by invisible threads of trust. To betray that trust in a moment of rage is not merely to harm one individual, but to fracture the collective. It is to poison the well from which all must drink. This is why restraint is sacred. The measure of a man is not his capacity to dominate others, but his capacity to govern himself. In the presence of peers, anger must be transmuted into something higher: clarity, honesty, even vulnerability, but never violence. For violence against one's brother is violence against oneself. Yet we must acknowledge the difficulty. To sit before cameras and microphones while carrying personal burdens is a trial few understand. Pain is not silent. It alters tone, posture, mood. Audiences notice the difference and speculate, weaving narratives of their own. For the performer, this creates a double weight: not only the private struggle itself, but the public misreading of it. To admit, then, that one's energy is off is an act of honesty, a refusal to let speculation define the truth. But honesty is not immunity. The temptation to lash out remains, is not eliminated by confession, only named. Among men, there exists an unspoken code, a recognition that while the world outside may attack, those within the circle must not turn their weapons upon one another. To violate this code is to break something more fundamental than rules. It is to fracture the very essence of trust. Queenzflip's reflection, then, is not trivial. It is the articulation of a moral crossroad, whether to allow the storm to turn inward upon those closest, or to hold the line and keep faith with the brotherhood. The mere fact of his questioning suggests an awareness of the stakes, an understanding that to cross that line would not merely be a lapse, but a betrayal. Discipline is the practice of saying no to the immediate in order to preserve the eternal. It is the act of holding oneself steady in the face of storms. For the man tempted to crash out, discipline is the difference between ruin and redemption. There are countless men who sit behind bars today because they mistook impulse for strength. They believed that the eruption of anger was proof of their manhood, when in truth it was evidence of their slavery, to their emotions, to their wounds, to their ungoverned selves. True strength lies not in eruption but in containment, not in destruction but in preservation. Queenzflip stands at that threshold, to erupt or to endure. His recognition of the choice is itself a step toward discipline. Consider the story of the warrior who sharpened his sword daily but never drew it in anger. The villagers mocked him, saying his strength was wasted. But when the day of true battle came, it was his patience that saved them, for he struck not out of impulse but out of necessity. His sword was not dulled by reckless swings, but sharp from restraint. So too with men in positions of influence. The temptation to strike is constant, but the true power lies in waiting, in discerning, in choosing the moment carefully, if it comes at all. The modern world often mistakes masculinity for mere aggression. But the deeper tradition, the one found in the wisdom of fathers and the parables of saints, understands masculinity as containment. A man is a vessel, designed not to spill his contents recklessly, but to carry them with steadiness. His family, his brothers, his community, all drink from what he carries. If he allows himself to shatter, they thirst. To be a man, then, is to master containment, to hold the storm without letting it destroy the vessel, to suffer privately without inflicting suffering publicly. This is the burden and the honor of manhood. Queenzflip's reflection is a reminder that public men are not immune to private storms. But it is also a reminder that discipline is possible. Anger does not have to become betrayal. Personal struggle does not have to become public destruction. The road forward is not easy. It requires humility, honesty, and relentless self-examination. But it is the only road that preserves both the man and the brotherhood he serves. And in choosing that road, he becomes not only a co-host but a model of what it means to endure as a man among men. The surmounting this imbroglio and proceeding apace is, without doubt, the quintessential apotheosis of this odyssey of psychic and ethereal pilgrimage. It is an unassailable verity that while the past bears the unalterable imprimatur of historicity and the effacement of visceral torment remains a Sisyphean endeavor, the ontological blank slate of future exigencies stands ready to receive the hieroglyphics of our volition. The sagacious determination to distill the didactic essence of conflagration and to utilize it to metamorphose into a more indomitable and resilient persona is a preeminent human imperative. It is an axiomatic comprehension that a man is not delineated by the crucible of his tribulations, but by the ineluctable manner in which he navigates the tumultuous tidal waves of his circumstances.